So, welcome to another show. So today uh, is an individual show again, and we're going to talk about something called existentialism. For those who have read about philosophy or have maybe listened to Jordan Peterson speak, probably knows what existentialism is. It's going to be a brief discussion about it, and just to give you some sort of key points and to get a better understanding, really, as to what it is and how it's relevant to you. So, existentialism is a metaphysical part of philosophy, and it emphasizes really freedom and choice and how this determines how you live your life, essentially. Now, for religious folk, they believe that essence precedes existence. Essence meaning ascribed to life, essentially. So existentialists actually believe that there's no such thing as determinism. There's nothing that's determined in respect of our purpose, what we should be doing in life. And actually it all comes down to our actions, our decisions as to how our life pans out. There's a belief within existentialism that we are born without a predetermined purpose. So again, this differs somewhat from a lot of other philosophies, and essentially, it's believed that we're unlike anything else in terms of objects, animals, who tend to have defined roles, don't they? Animals behave the same as each other within their own species. They eat the same, they live in the same way. Objects, again, the same thing. We are quote unquote gods in that respect, that we can design something and manage it. But a car can only act as a car. We, as humans, can actually create a lot more than that. And yes, there are going to be some limitations to that, of course, as there are with anything. But what it's saying is that this should act as a liberating thought, essentially, that we can create our own future. But with that comes responsibility as well, doesn't it? If you think back to when you were a child, the reason that childhood was so great for, I'm not speaking about for everyone, of course, but for most of us, is that we had no responsibility. We could go to school, do what we wanted. There was no financial implications really, and there wasn't actually any punishment implications. And yes, you may get detention, but it's not something that's going to hinder you moving forward long term. But with freedom comes responsibility, and that is the fundamental part really of existentialism. Because Sartre put it this way: man is nothing. Only afterwards will he be something, and he himself will have made what he will be. So it's saying that you start as nothing, you become something, and it was what you did that made you become that. So what this gives you then is total responsibility, and it sort of moves you away from blaming external forces, the government, my parents, God, my friends, and it gives you a sense of power or empowerment, should I say rather. The problem is though, when you understand that you have that freedom and that power, you can sometimes put too much emphasis on your decisions. And I'm not saying that decisions aren't important. I mean, they are, of course. But when you put too much on something, you can become anxious about it and actually perform worse. I mean, we know this from, when we put too much pressure on public speaking or going on a date or an interview, we actually don't perform very well. But when we're relaxed and we don't really care about the outcome to an extent, we perform much better. So could that cause issue? Now, the other part of existentialism that's important, or one of the other parts, is that because you have the freedom to decide who and what you want to be and do and become, there needs to be some synergy really with your authentic self without conforming to external pressures or maybe societal expectations. Now, for me, this is a slight contradiction within existentialism because if it's saying that we have a choice to become who we want to become, but then we need to live authentically with our true self, does that not dictate the potential for a predetermined set of personalities or gifts? I'm not sure. I'm not saying it does or it doesn't, but it's something to consider here. What else existentialism talks about is the absurd or absurdity. And it says that the universe is chaotic to an extent, although on the flip side, it's actually fairly ordered as well. But as humans, we have a desire for meaning and structure, but we also have a desire for chaos. And understanding that, it can lead us to inaction, alienation, alienation, and separation from others, and maybe loneliness in that regard. Because it is strange that we want chaos, but we want order, and that we need to find our authentic self. All of that can lead us to some form of isolation. Now, obviously, the burden of freedom is a real thing. The burden of responsibility, the burden of freedom, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, a lot of people think about freedom as freedom from to freedom from my boss, freedom from my job, or maybe freedom to be able to travel. And this is the key part, really. What are you free to do? And is that down to your own decisions, or is there predetermination there? And at the end of the day, we are all going to die. There isn't inevitability about it. And does that give you freedom? Does that release you from getting in your own way? Now, the early influencers of, or creators maybe, of existentialism were Soren Kierkegaard, and then you had Nietzsche and Heidegger, Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir. So there are some literature pieces out there if you wanted to look at that, of course. But it's important that we understand what existentialism means as opposed to necessarily who coined the phrases and things like that. But they all have good points. So Kierkegaard says that maybe subjective experience is important. So let's say that we're taking a leap of faith because we're religious, and that is based on a lack of rational evidence. Can we behave in that way, or do we need evidence? And is experience subjective to each individual person? And we can't actually determine what that's going to be. Obviously, Nietzsche said God is dead in terms of people aren't really as religious anymore, and they take it upon themselves to create something. Um, and Heidegger said that it's important for us to confront morality or mortality rather. So understand that we are going to die, which can allow us to maybe move and act more aggressively to get what we want to from life. Problem is though, is if we don't have any determinism, so there's hard determinism and soft determinism. So one is that you believe everything's determined, and one is that you maybe believe some parts are. If you are existentialist or an existentialist, does that maybe lead to nihilism in respect of you don't believe that life has any meaning? Could that brew or breed that type of thought process? We've heard of the story of Sisyphus, haven't we? Hades, I believe, and pushing the boulder uphill forever until obviously you die and it crushes you. That's what life is like. And it's up to us to understand that and pick our poison to an extent. Pick the boulder and pick the hill. You have that choice. Again, choice in some respects is an illusion. You can only make choices within the confines and rules of the earth and the universe and whatever else, but you still have choices. Viktor Frankl, the book Man's Search for Meaning, shows that your choice or choosing a way to think can affect how you feel and ultimately how your life is lived. So, as you know, he was a Holocaust survivor, but actually he thought about his purpose and the reason for him being there and what he was trying to achieve, which meant that he was in a healthy mental state. He understood that it was up to him to plan his actions and not down to something else. So you can see here that there are some positives, aren't there, of existentialism, which I think are things such as personal responsibility, freedom, but there's also some negatives as well, the anxiety and things like that, um, about decision making. So start to think about how you can use existentialist or an existentialist philosophy in your own life. You are the captain of your own ship, and you decide where it goes. The problem is, for me, one problem that has been brought up is that if you are an existentialist, do you spend too much time thinking and not acting? Because if you're thinking about what you need to be doing and how you can live authentically and how you can empower yourself and what your next decision is, do you tend to procrastinate? Something to think about. So, yeah, that's existentialism. And thanks for listening to another show.